We bring in Stuckey from the Action Network, who does such fine work, has a handful of podcasts out there, at Stuckey2 on Twitter. Stuckey, we've been talking a lot about Notre Dame and Georgia. I've made my point. I am a Notre Dame fan, but I think they have a lot of deficiencies, especially up the spine of that defense. Georgia can run the ball as good as any team in the country. So right now, Georgia laying a monster number at 14. Are you going to lay that number with the Bulldogs come Saturday night?
I haven't decided yet, but I'm leaning that way. I wouldn't go over 14, but I think your Irish are in trouble. I mean, look, they're giving up an average of 220 yards on the ground to Louisville and New Mexico. That just spells disaster against this Georgia team, which just has an absolutely stacked offensive line, a stable of backs that just should be able to run all over Notre Dame. It's a little personal, too. I think with not going to the playoff last year, Notre Dame getting that spot in Athens, so this is a tough spot for Notre Dame defense that just looks like it's going to struggle defending the run, which is just a nightmare against Georgia. And look, the last two times Notre Dame has played a top 5 SEC team, 2007, they lost, I think, 42-14 to Alabama. 6 years later, to LSU. 6 years later, they lost 42-14 to LSU. Now it's 6 years later again. I think you could maybe looking at a similar score. It's going to take a special effort from Book and the Irish, and they might need a few turnovers to hang around here.
Stuckey, this is Jinx. UCF is one of the hottest teams in college football, once again making noise in that top 25. They originally opened as a 10-point favorite against Pitt. Now that line is up to UCF minus 12. Is there still any value there on the Golden Knights?
I don't. I think this line's a little high now.
Yeah.
We make it significantly lower. Now, look, I'm still trying to figure out exactly who Pitt is. They brought in Mark Whipple from UMass, who's known as, a passing guru. All he did was pass at UMass, and Narduzzi's a run-first guy. So I think they can take a lot out of that close game. Not the decision by Narduzzi to kick, but they can take a lot out of that Penn State game. I think UCF, from what they've done so far this year, is a little overvalued. I mean, against Stanford last week in just a terrible spot. I mean, Stanford in between 2 Pac-12 games, all banged up without their 5-star tackles. I think in the market now, they're inflated. I think UCF wins, but Pitt makes this, a game and makes it a little interesting for 3 quarters or so.
Stuckey, Michigan on the road playing Wisconsin. They're a dog by now 3.5 points, opened at 3. I think maybe Michigan's a little overvalued here. Is there any value going at the public favorite in Michigan, or do you like Wisconsin as the favorite?
No, I mean, look, if this is scary because Michigan has looked so bad, but I think that the bye couldn't have come at a better time for Michigan, who's installing, a new offense, and they looked, they looked sloppy, and they were dropping the ball, tons of lost fumbles, missed passes. They needed to figure some things out. They also needed to get healthier. Meanwhile, Wisconsin was just rolling, albeit inferior competition the first 2 weeks. So I think the bye really helps Michigan. In the offseason, the look-ahead line for this game was about Michigan minus 6.5. So I went into this week saying, look, if I can get over 3 with Michigan, I'll take it. Hopefully you get Peoples-Jones back, which will help at receiver, Runyon back at tackle. You could get defensive line help. The run defense is scary after what you saw against Army going against Taylor in Wisconsin. But look, I think this is just an overreaction for what we saw Michigan struggle, and I don't really take that much from Wisconsin dominating, a South Florida team that looks like it's going to be bad, and then a MAC bottom feeder.
Chat once again with Stuckey from the Action Network, at Stuckey2 on Twitter, and of course his podcast, one with Colin Wilson, and he does another one on the NFL. Make sure to search those out, the Action Network podcasts. Great listens to get you prepared for the upcoming weeks of NFL and college football action. Stuckey, Friday night, Utah is on the road at the Coliseum against USC, and USC, I was on BYU, and I was fortunate to come home with that on Saturday, and now you see Utah laying 4 at USC. This line seems a little short, and you're starting to see some wise guy action come in on the Trojans. Where are you on this one?
Yeah, look, I was with you on BYU, and I was petrified. I'm glad that we ended up getting to the window in that game. But I'm actually leaning towards the Trojans here. This really doesn't mean anything, but it's a crazy stat. Utah hasn't won in the Coliseum ever. I believe they haven't won in Los Angeles since 1916. But there's one thing that this Utah defense struggles with, and if you look back over the last 5 years when they've been excellent, and it's the air raid. So they're 0-5 against the spread, and it's really just been Washington State, who they can't beat. They cannot beat Mike Leach. And then Cal when Sonny Dykes was still there. And the reason is they play, press man, and they're going to be aggressive, and they can get picked. And so these USC receivers, I think, can have some success against the Utah defense, and they're going to play ultra aggressive because you saw what BYU did. They played it similar to Washington, and Washington always shuts down this air raid. They blitz 3, they drop 8, and they don't play man, and they just let you, they don't get picked off, and they keep everything in front of them. So I think that this sets up for a big game for the kids close home where you be more comfortable after 3 picks. Some USC defense, especially on the edge and guarding mobile quarterbacks that I've seen, is a little worrisome. But as of right now, I haven't finalized a bet, but I'm actually leaning towards USC. I think this is a thriller.
Stuckey got one more college game for you. Auburn at Texas A&M, huge battle in the SEC. Aggies are favored by 3.5, but the money looks like it's come in on Auburn. What side you taking here?
Yeah, I'm actually going to not bet the full game, but I'm looking at the first half. So
Okay.
Texas A&M, one of the best home fields in the country, and you have Bo Nix in his first true road game, right? And Kellen Mond's been in these games forever. And you saw Bo Nix in that huge game against Oregon. Auburn won despite Bo Nix. I know he made that huge throw at the end. But there was a lot of throws that were just off. He was inaccurate. So I think there might be a little nerves here. They also have a safety who comes in on nickel packages, big special teams performer who's suspended for the first half due to targeting. But Gus Malzahn in his halftime adjustments, you saw it against Oregon. You might see it here. You might see the kick settle down. But Texas A&M minus 2.5 first half. I feel confident in them at least having the lead by a field goal or so at the half.
Stuckey, I want to get your opinion real quickly on just 2 NFL games where the spreads are just ridiculous. You're looking at the Dolphins and the Cowboys. The Cowboys right now favored by 21.5. And then, of course, you have the Patriots playing the Jets. And as it stands, they're favored by 23. Will you touch or bet on the dogs in this game? Or is it, kind of too lopsided and just crazy spreads in the NFL for you to touch?
Look, I mean, historically, I would just say I'm catching 21.5 in an NFL game. I have to take the underdog. I mean, sometimes I think that when you're catching 15, 11, the thing with the Dolphins, I just don't know. We haven't seen anything like this. I don't know how historically bad they are. In 8 weeks from now, would this line be 28? And they're trading everyone. I don't know what the locker room is like. There obviously is just no desire to win. Even you have teams that are 0-14, as these Brown teams, they still want to win a game or so. I've never seen anything like this. So if you put a gun to my head and make me bet, I'm probably going to take the points in an NFL game, catching over 3 touchdowns, which I think in the history of the NFL, a lot of them are way back in the day. NFL teams favored by 21 or more, 11, 22, and 2 against the spread, so they've been horrific. I mean, it's just really hard to cover that big of a number. And NFL teams aren't going to run it up, like in college where you'll see a team run it up. They're going to pull everyone, run the ball, make sure that they stay healthy. In regards to the Jets, I would feel a little more comfortable taking them, especially if it gets to 24. I don't think the Patriots are going to really run it up. I just don't know how the Jets will score. That Patriots secondary is excellent. You have, Luke Falk at quarterback and an undermanned receiving core. They're just going to have to give it to Bell 50 times and hope. So my short answer is, if I had to, I'd bet both dogs, but I might just stay away.
All right, Stuckey, before we let you run, I'm a big fan of making money during the week. We mentioned USC and Utah. That's the Friday night game. I was on Air Force. I may have sent an angry text to Jenks, whose wife is a Colorado fan, yelling that their kicker should have made the extra point and not forced overtime. But, hey, we prevailed. They go to the Smurf turf on Friday night, Stuckey, about 45 seconds. Air Force right now getting 8.5 at Boise. Your feel?
I was livid, too. That was the first missed extra point by a Colorado kicker in like 5 years, too. I think Air Force, anything over a touchdown is good to go. This team is legit. I think a challenger in the conference. Their offensive line has brought back all 5 starters. They dominate on both sides in the trenches against Colorado. Boise State's offensive line, supposed to be a strength. They've had injuries. They have 2 freshmen in there now. They've been giving up a ton of pressure, even in Portland State. I think Air Force keeps this close, obviously with their option, grinding the clock. You're taking an option team, catching points. But I think they win this. They at least cover in the trenches. I wouldn't be surprised if they pull off the upset.
Ooh, another Friday night sweat for a game in Boise. It worked against Marshall, so we came home in that one. Hey, Stuckey, appreciate the insight as always, man.
Absolutely.
There
Good
he
luck
is.
this weekend, guys.